Hi, today we're going to talk about Pearson's product moment correlation coefficient. So whenever we describe a linear correlation between two variables, we have to understand that that is going to be subjective when gauging it by eye because everybody looks at things from a different point of view. So to get an accurate measure of the strength of a linear correlation between two variables, we use what we call Pearson's correlation coefficient, which is denoted by the letter R. So the formula for Pearson's correlation coefficient is this formula here, but you do not have to memorize that, so don't worry. I'm going to show you how to find it in the calculator. One thing that you have to know about Pearson's correlation coefficient is that it's going to range from -1 to a +1. So the image to the right is going to be a guide for when you want to describe the strength of a linear correlation. So anytime you get closer to 1, whether it's a -1 or a +1, we consider these strong correlations. So a negative means that it's a negative trend, meaning that the points are going down from left to right. Positive means it's an upward trend, which means the points are going up from left to right. So the closer you get to a positive or a -1, the stronger you are. As you get closer to 0, you're going to become weaker. And if your correlation coefficient is 0, this just means that you have no correlation. All right. So in order to do this in our calculator, we are going to take the following steps. So if you want to make a scatter plot or find the correlation coefficient, the first two steps are always the same. The first thing you need to do is turn your stat diagnostics on by pressing mode and then turning the stat diagnostics on. So I'm going to press mode and go down to stat diagnostics, and I will select on. Okay, so now my stat diagnostics are turned on. So then you want to enter in your data into the stat menu. So you're going to press stat edit. Your X values are going to go in L1 and your Y values are going to go in L2. Okay. In order to make a scatter plot, what you will have to do is if you look above the Y equals button on your calculator, you're going to see where it says stat plot. So anything you put in stat, you can actually plot it. Okay. And make a graph of it. So you will have to turn your plot on. So you'll have to press second Y equals. And then you are going to go to number 1. You're going to turn your plot on. And then you're going to select the type of plot that you want. Very, very similar to how we did box and whisker plots. And the scatter plot is the first one there. Okay. And it's telling us that our X list is in L1 and our Y list is in L2, like we normally do it. Once we put that in there, then we're going to press zoom. And then we're going to go down to zoom 9 for it to graph our information. So if I press zoom 9, I don't have anything in there, so that's why it's giving me that error. Okay. Now, in order to find your Pearson's correlation coefficient, all you have to do is you will go to stat, put in your data like normal, and then you're going to press stat again. Once you put your data in, you're going to go over to calc, and then you're going to go to number 4, which is linear regression, and it has AX plus B, which should remind you of MX plus B. And then once we select that, we can say that our X list comes from L1 and the Y list comes from L2. The frequency list is blank, and then we just go to calculate. And of course, here it's going to give us an error because I don't have any data put in. So let's look at an example here. So in the example here, it says the data in the table below shows the number of passengers and the number of suitcases on various airplanes. So we have our number of passengers, we have our number of suitcases. So we want to first draw a scatter plot of the data using technology. So I need to put this data in. So I'm going to go to stat, edit. I'm going to put the number of passengers as my X in L1. And then in L2, I'm going to put in the number of suitcases. So that's 79, 217, 172, 82, 219, 57, 286, 219. All right, so there's the number of suitcases. So it says we want to draw a scatter plot using technology. So I am going to go to second y equals. I'm going to make sure that my plot is turned on. If yours is turned off, turn it on. I'm going to make sure that my scatter plot, the first selection, is selected. And then I'm going to press zoom 9 for zoom stat. So here is my scatter plot. All right, so that's how I could graph it. So now it says determine the correlation coefficient R. So I've already put my data into L1 and L2. So all I have to do is press stat, go over to calc, and then I go down to number 4. X values are L1, Y values are L2. Everything else is blank. Go down to calculate. And as you can see here, we see our equation and we see the value for R there. So our correlation coefficient here is 0.306. Okay, and now it says describe the correlation between the number of passengers and the number of suitcases. So 0.306 lies somewhere in here. So this would be 0.306 here. So we can tell that this is a weak positive correlation. Okay, I already know it's weak because it's closer to 0 than it is to 1. And I know it's positive because the actual number is positive. So this is a weak positive correlation. All right. So just remember, whenever you're talking about the strength of your correlation here, you need to make sure you understand. I like to tell students to think about grades. Anytime you see a 1, that means a whole or 100%. 0.8 is like 80%. 0.5 is like 50%. So anytime you are between 80% and 100%, whether it's positive or negative, remember the negative just means the direction. Okay? Positive and negative just talks about the direction. It doesn't talk about the strength. So anytime you're between 0.8 and 1, that's strong. That's like an 80% to 100%. Okay? Anytime you're between 50% and 80%, that is what we call moderate or like medium. And anything less than 50% is going to be weak. So if you have any questions on Pearson's correlation coefficient, please let me know and I'll be more than happy to assist you. Have a great day.